Now we are on Facebook Live. So Pastor Denis, if I can have you introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Denis Webb, and I'm the pastor of the Bear Creek Community Church here in Irving, Texas. I'm also a city council member for the city of Irving. I was elected in 2011, serving out my last term because I'm termed out. I'm married to my wife, Lydia, for 38 years. Been pastoring the Bear Creek Church that I actually started in my den from a support group for people that was addicted to drugs. And I really appreciate you inviting me to be on your show.
Sorry. Hello, Monica. My name is Clarence Ford. I'm the senior pastor at Hill Chapel Christian Methodist Episcopal Church. I am also the director of social justice ministries for the Christian Methodist Episcopal Church in the state of Texas. I've pastored at Hill Chapel for over 15 years now in the Plano area, Collin County. I'm married for going on 10 years to Dawn Jillian Ford, and I'm just honored to be here and to participate in your program this morning. Thank you. Oh, we can't hear you, Monica.
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can.
Now we can.
Okay. All right, so I was saying that I just want to say it's such an honor and privilege to have two clergies at the same time, to have a pastor and a reverend. It's such a blessing to have you guys. So let's just get right to it. Let's get started. Actually, Reverend Clarence, I wanted you to, I know Dwight had told me your church was historic. Can you mention that?
Well, yes, Hill Chapel is a historic congregation within the Plano community. We have been there for over 124 years. Members of the African American community who initially moved into the Plano area and purchased the land after emancipation, established what is called the Douglas community, the Frederick Douglass community, and Hill Chapel was the first congregation to be established there. There is also a cemetery, a historic African American cemetery that's attached to our property. That the original citizens of the Douglas community in Plano were they're interned there, and these are the persons who helped start this congregation, to start the school that is there in the community, the Frederick Douglass, which used to be the Frederick Douglass School for colored, for Blacks in the area. So we're really engaged in the community, and both from the onset of the community, from its inception up until now.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that. So because you're both leaders of African American churches, so let's talk about a little bit about police brutality. How can the church promote social justice in the light of shootings of unarmed Black men and women? And I say Black men and women because it has been Black men and women. If I can get started with you, Pastor Denis.
Well, I got several answers to this. Probably number one, the most important thing that a church can do to promote social justice, especially in this community, is use its local influence. Use its local influence that it has in its community to ensure that the police officers and the law enforcement officials in its local community understands the need for social justice. Also, I would encourage pastors, as I've done myself, or leaders in churches, to run for political offices in your locality. Most of these issues, they're going to be solved at the municipal level. We can promote, and it's good to promote social justice nationwide, but where you're going to really make the impact is in your own local community with your police officers and with your city officials. So if you find yourself sitting in a seat like I do, where you have the ability to affect a lot of change simply because you are one of the council members or leaders of the city, that's one of the best positions to be put into. Also, pastors and churches need to educate, their members as to what's happening in the world and what's happening in the area of social injustice, and then encourage them to get involved. Too often after the cameras go off and after the marches stop, then we go back to, things as usual, status quo as usual, and, of course, pastors, we're very busy. I mean, our primary goal is to try to win souls and try to promote the gospel. However, part of that call is, to make sure that those that are unjustly treated are treated fairly. So we got to make sure that we don't allow our congregants to forget that there's still this struggle going on every single day. And we cannot just, step back and think everything is fine because there's nothing that's happening in the media. And then, get to know your police chiefs. I tell people all the time, we've got a great police chief in Irving. You can call him, he'll talk to you. So if you got social justice concerns about police brutality or police, activities, talk to the people that can really make the difference.
Yes. Oh, we
can't hear
you, Monica.
In other words, what you're saying is that we need to get acquainted to our local government.
Exactly.
Okay. Reverend Clarence, how can you advise Black people, even though we have seen this time of protest, it has been multiracial, all races really participated, but how can people protest, or how can the church advise people to protest without negatively impacting the community?
Well, first thing is, as Pastor Webb mentioned, I would encourage and I instruct our members to be engaged. Mm-hmm. It is one thing to actively protest. It's another thing to be engaged with your community and with your leaders to the point to where you can actually effect change. And that's what I believe is more important. We have had in the Plano community, of course, we've had protest gatherings, I'm going to call it, because it wasn't more of a march or anything, but protest gatherings that were very peaceful. It is good to bring light to a situation, which is what your active engagement in protest does. But in order to effect change, and that's what we hope, and that's what we want. We don't, sometimes we may mistakenly utilize the protest moment to vent and then fall back into the way we were. But if you're engaged with your leaders, with your community, if the congregation is engaged from the pulpit to the pew, then we can work for the change that we're hoping for and that we're calling for.
Okay, Pastor Denis, you know that confrontation, it doesn't win. Is the church teaching its members how to interact with police in case they are stopped? How do you impact Black men and women to interact with police when they are stopped so that it doesn't escalate?
Okay, and I can't speak for all churches, but I can speak for the church I have. Mm-hmm. One thing that we do, and we've been doing this now, probably 8-9 years, we partner with the Urban Police Department and the local branch of the NAACP here in the Irving to sponsor what we call Law Enforcement and You. And actually, it's a meeting between police officials and the community. We've done 2 here at my church. A couple of pastor friends of mine have hosted them at their church. And what we do is we have the chief of police and some of his staff come out, and they sit on a panel. And so the citizens are allowed to ask the police chief and the police officers any question that they want to ask them. There is no question that's off limit. So there's this conversation that takes place between the actual police officers, the chief, and those that come. And then after it's over, the police and the chief and all will engage the citizens who want to come up to them and talk to them and continue to further those relationships. A couple of weeks ago, I actually held an event here at my church. It was July the 8th, called Law Enforcement and Youth. And what it was the same type of setup, but this time what I did is I had youth who were actually part of the panel. So I had the police chief, I had several of his police officers, I had a Dallas sheriff, who's actually a member of my church. I had a former ATF agent, was a white former ATF agent. He was part of the panel, and I had 6 youth, and they was all, and so these youth were allowed to ask them any questions that they want to ask them. So they engaged, and so it was interesting. And you can actually watch that if you want to actually go watch it. It's at the Bear Creek Church Irving Facebook page, and it's about an hour-long panel discussion, very informative. They was asking questions about this very thing. How should I act if I'm stopped? What is my rights? Which was one of the most interesting questions I thought for the night. One of the young ladies asked, what is my rights when I'm stopped by a police officer? And so the chief lays it out to them. So those type of events, and I'm pretty sure that any church can host one, just contact its police department and say, hey, look, can we do a law enforcement and youth event whereby, and the goal is to get the police officers to interact with the people in a setting where, first of all, they feel comfortable,
Right.
but then to continue to develop relationships beyond that panel discussion. One of the young men asked a question to the chief. He said, I would just like for a police officer, if they come through my neighborhood and they see us outside, to just stop and talk to us. So that's something that we are actually working on. Me and the chief, we're working on doing something similar to that. So that's one way. Like I said, I can't speak for all churches. I'm pretty sure some churches are trying to do something, but that's just something that we've been doing for a while here in our city with our police department.
So what I understand, go ahead, Reverend Clarence.
I do want to say something, because we also have had engagement with our police force, but I also would add this: make no mistake, there is a problem with policing.
Sure.
Philando Castile complied with everything that the police officer asked.
Absolutely.
He was a licensed to carry gun owner.
Right.
And it was within his right. He was not reaching for a gun. His child was in the car. He complied. And the officer unloaded his gun into Philando Castile's chest.
Right.
Mir Rice was playing in a park with a toy. And within 12 seconds, the officer took his life. So there's a problem with policing. And as much as we can do in the church, and we do, Pastor Webb has said, and we've held engagements where we want to talk to our young people, talk to our congregation, partner them with the police force in the area. In the Douglas community, we have a local community officer that comes through. But the problem, that we're seeing is not with the community and those officers that are partnering. The problem is policing and those officers that are not there. In the Metroplex, Pastor Webb can do things with the Irving police in his community, and that's great. But one of the young men from his church, and I can do things in Plano with the police in my community, but when one of our young men goes to McKinney, all right, or one of our young ladies is at a swimming party that got out of hand in McKinney, and Eric Caseboat shows up and pins her down to the ground. That's a problem with policing.
Yeah.
How policing is done and how police are recruited. When Trayvon Martin was shot, I had a long conversation with the chief of police, Greg Russian, who was the chief of police at that time for the city of Plano. And we talked for about an hour and a half over the phone about that case. And he shared some things with me. And one of the things he shared was go out and look at our recruiting video and see the type of police officers we recruit. And I would challenge those that are watching to take some time today to look at 2 recruiting videos, one for the city of Plano and one for the city of Denison, Texas.
Okay.
When you see the one for the city of Denison, Texas, it's like they're recruiting mercenaries. And for the city of Plano, the recruiting video has the air and the atmosphere of we're recruiting people to partner with our citizens.
Denis, Pastor Denis, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, the other thing too I would like to add to that is that, one of the things that I tell young people, and I agree with you, there has been a lot of cases where people have complied, and unfortunately, the police officers didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
But I tell people all the time, I say your best chance of a good outcome is to learn how to comply. And I can't help, and nobody can control a rogue police officer.
Right.
It's almost like a roll of the die. But your best outcome, like I tell people, is whatever they ask you to do, do it. And then if you got some questions, then follow up later on with the proper. But right there on the scene, not the place for you to decide that you're gonna not comply. You're gonna lose. So I just tell them, look, you may be done wrong. It may be an unfair stop. But just go ahead and whatever they ask you to do, yes sir. And do it, and then prayerfully and hopefully you don't run into one of those police officers that that's not going to do right regardless. But the majority of the stops will end up being okay. So I want to put because one of the things that concerns me is that we're starting to put in the African American minds of a lot of young African Americans almost that they don't have to respect authority anymore. And that is not the case. They will always have to respect the authority, whether we like the authority, whether we think it's fair or just. We need to teach our young people, to respect that authority and go along with it, and then again, if you've got a problem later on, address it. But you and a police officer on the side of the road, you'll never win.
Right. And that's what. And I have a son who is 20 years old, and I always teach my son too that regardless, whether it is your fault or not, you still have to have the yes sir, no sir, because you don't know the outcome. And I think also too, from knowing that there has been police brutality, we always have to assume that they're intimidated by maybe a black skin, and that is why we have to be yes sir, no sir. Do you agree with that, Reverend?
Are you talking to me or Reverend Ford?
Reverend, he was on mute.
Oh, I believe that we ought to be respectful. Yes, and I agree. And I agree you're going to get a better outcome most of the time.
Right.
You're not going to win the battle on the road. But I think it's problematic to, that my skin is my sin. That for somehow if I just show up and if my skin is the intimidating thing, there's almost nothing I can do. Right. If that is the perspective of the officer, and that's what I mean, that policing is problematic. If that is the perspective of the officer, then he shouldn't be an officer. Right. You know, if I've skinned, you know, teaching young people, and again, we work with our congregation, we work with our young people, and particularly, I have two sons. I, you know, work with them and advise them. You know, you get stopped, comply. These are your rights. Comply with the officer. If you can, call me. You know, if you're nearby or whatever, call me. They're grown now, so I'm telling them, no, don't call me. But when they were teenagers and driving, they were driving my vehicle.
Right.
If you get stopped, call me. Comply with the officer. If you're nearby and I can get there, I will. Um, just to give them that assurance. But it's problematic to, you know, for an officer to have that, um, to be intimidated somehow because I'm a Black person that you've pulled over, you know, or that you're engaging. That's very much problematic.
And it's unfortunate we cannot change the color of our skin. So, but we have to be safe. So let's talk about the pandemic. Housing, a lot of poor people live in high occupancy, high density rental properties as opposed to suburban homes. Suburban homes are more at risk to exposure. How is the church reaching out? What are your educational campaigns? If I can start with you, Pastor Webb.
Well, and boy, I tell you, this is, as you probably heard said many times, this is unprecedented that we're dealing with this pandemic. But, you know, I tell my congregation, I tell people also when I do some of my live streaming, you know, follow the CDC guidelines. You know, I mean, I know we have a right in our country, whether we decide to wear a mask or not. But, you know, one of the things that, you know, and people can argue whether they work or not, but the reality of it is, you know, scientists said, yeah, it does help. So I tell my congregations, wear a mask. Matter of fact, when you come into our facility, you're required, if you're interacting with another person, to have a mask. We have masks. We had shut down our services like most people did back in April. We started back having services. We always live stream, but we started back having services, but on a very limited basis. You know, our sanctuary will hold about 200 people. We're in a temporary sanctuary. It'll hold about 200 people, and I told them most I'm going to put in there is 50. You know, and we've got the sanctuary range so that, you know, you are actually sitting a good distance from somebody else. But as they come in the door, they have we check their temperatures. We've got hand sanitizer that's available to them. And if they don't have a mask, we give them a mask. So we promote, you know, these safety features by actually ourselves leading out by doing them. I wear a mask whenever you see me. So I would just tell people, just follow the guidelines that are being, you know, put before you. And unfortunately, if you live in a very high density, you know, area, you know, most people can't afford to move. So you just kind of have to really kind of know, here are the guidelines. I need to self-distance myself or social distance myself. So I need to figure out how to do that, you know, in light of the constraints I have of being in this dense area. But yeah, we definitely are promoting the social distancing and the wearing of the mask, and you know, and then especially African American community, we got so many underlying conditions in our community. You know, and like for instance, you know, I've got some elderly members of my congregation. I told them, don't show up. I know you want to come to church, but no, don't come. You know, you are a susceptible audience, so I don't want to put you in a position. So that's how we promote it. You know, simply trying to make sure that we follow the guidelines of the CDC.
Reverend, what are you guys doing in your church?
The same. We have a team. We haven't started holding in-person worship services yet. We do everything streamed now, online, via over a few platforms, YouTube and Facebook, and we utilize Zoom to do some interactive things, to engage with people interactively. But we advise people and we work with them to follow the health professionals, follow the CDC guidelines, listen to those who have committed their lives to study and create opportunities for good health. I know in the African American community, there's a history of distrust because of things that have been done. Many of those things that were done, like the Tuskegee experiment, were politically motivated. So we encourage people to follow the health guidelines from the CDC. We teach them. We have a team like Pastor Webb's and Bear Creek. When we do have in-person services, we have a team that's put together a process where we will check temperatures. We will make sure everyone has a mask. We will have hand sanitizers available. And we utilize our web presence to share that information, to make sure that people are getting that information. And if there are those, we avail ourselves so that if there are those who don't have the resources to get masks and hand sanitizers, then we avail ourselves to help provide that for them.
Well, right now, with a lot of people being laid off or followed, there's a loss of income. So are churches conducting food pantries? Is there anything like that in your church, Pastor Webb?
Yes, actually, we have, I guess here's 3 areas that we do. We've always had a homeless ministry as part of our congregation. We've got a ministry called Neighbor Feeding Neighbor, and it's geared toward the homeless population. Before COVID, we used to bring them into the church on Tuesday evenings and provide a hot meal for them along with the Bible study. And then we've also, our church is it's the inclement weather shelter for the city of Irving, which means that, during the winter when the temperature dropped below 32 degrees, we actually open up our facility and the homeless comes in, they sleep in our facility for however long they need to. And so we've always had this connection with the homeless. Well, after COVID-19 came, we couldn't bring them into the building anymore. So we started going downtown, taking hot meals to them. It started out at about 45 to 50 meals. And then we've expanded it now so that we don't just go to Irving, we go to Dallas. So we're cooking and preparing and distributing about 250 hot cooked meals on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays over in Dallas and here in Irving. But also on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, depending on when we get it, we are actually also giving away food boxes. Part of our food box distribution is part of the President Trump's initiative, the Farmers to Family initiative, where they give out these vegetable boxes. And so, but we're also connected with about 5 other nonprofit food banks, and they give us food. And so what we'll do is particularly on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, we will distribute boxes. People just drive up, open up their trunk, and put food boxes in their cars, and then they leave. We do not ask for ID. These food boxes will consist of anything from milk to eggs to chicken to vegetables. And so we'll do 150 of those each time we do it. And then the third thing, we're actually starting it this Monday. We're connecting with a ministry called Agape Connect, and we're going to be handing out to-go lunches for kids here at the church as part of trying to help, feed the kids, during the summer. And so we're going to be allocating 250 grab-and-go lunches for kids on Mondays and Thursdays. And so we're just trying to, like I said, I understand the need is great. People are losing jobs, and one of the other issues that I have learned is, while school was going on, these parents had the ability to have their kids go to school and get free breakfast and get free lunch. Well, now those kids are at home. And so these parents, and especially single mothers, are having to try to figure out how to feed these teenagers now Monday through Friday when they didn't have to in the past. So those are some initiatives that we're doing, and we've been doing it for a while. And I know there's other churches doing it. We're not the only churches doing it. I know other churches here in our city that's doing it also.
Okay. Reverend?
We operate what's called a Red Door Pantry.
Mhm.
It's a personal walk up or drive up red door pantry where individuals can come on a daily basis and get items to prepare a meal for themselves. So whether they're in the community, whether they're homeless, children, whomever, can come and get items from the red door pantry and enough items to prepare a meal. We also are engaged with one of the areas where um, that tends to be forgotten is nursing homes, and we're engaged with a senior citizen home in our community. We've had a partnership with them for a number of years, and we're helping to provide the necessary means for the citizens in those nursing homes,
Mhm.
both in terms of helping them stay safe and helping them helping with provisions for their ongoing care.
So, do you guys have days that you provide these meals, and how does community get to know when you're providing the meals?
For for us, it's a walk up. It's daily,
Okay.
7 days a week.
Okay.
And Pastor Webb,
Pastor
Well,
Webb, you have days?
in our case, like I said, our distribution for the food, it's usually Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Our homeless feeding is Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. And so what we do is we advertise via Facebook. We post on Facebook when we're doing these. Also, we have a marquee. Our church is located kind of on Main Street. So we have a marquee that we put free food. We put on the marquee. We get a lot of people. We also partner with about 4 or 5 other smaller congregations. And so when we get foods, and when I say we get food, we get pallets of food.
Okay.
we get pallets of vegetable boxes. On a given day, we may get 300 boxes of vegetables. And so what we do is we'll call these other churches and we'll tell them, we've got some vegetable boxes to distribute, and then they will come over, and so we'll share with them. And so we may give them 30 boxes to take to their congregation. And so we've been doing it for a while. The word is kind of out. We actually have people who drive by the church and they'll pull up and say, "Oh, are y'all giving away food today?" We also have an internal food pantry that actually we've always had it for a while. But then after people started losing their jobs here in the congregation, we stocked it, and it was really designed more for our members. But we really didn't have a lot of members that started, coming and utilizing it. So then we just kind of opened it up to the public.
So, Reverend Webb, there's a lot of stress due to the pandemic lockdowns, with families stuck at home and kids out of school. Domestic violence cases have increased. How is the church assisting to relieve stress? Is there any counseling? What are you doing?
Well, we actually have a counseling center here at the church. But when I say counseling center, one of my associate ministers, he's a counselor for Parkland emergency room, and he's also provides a ministry for drug addiction people. So what he does by appointment, he will counsel with people. But also what I have started doing is I do a Sunday morning Bible study. Since we're not having our regular Sunday school time, I started streaming a Sunday morning Bible study from my office. And so the content of my Bible study now is more geared toward these stresses. I'm doing more Bible studies based around, dealing with anger, dealing with stress, hope. I'm choosing topics that as I go through the week, and I just kind of keep up with what's happening in people's lives. Then I try to bring a word during that study that really focus in on trying to go where people are at the time. Financial, struggles, things like that. Those are the two main things you do. The other thing we have, and we didn't start this because of the pandemic, but we have a caregivers ministry here. And what it is that we have members that are assigned to like our elderly members. So like one member is assigned to like, you know, an elderly person to, you know, stay in contact with that person, to kind of, you know, be the caregiver for that person. We've been doing that for several years though. So,
Right.
but because now we're not seeing these elderly coming to church, then their responsibilities is even more now because they're kind of isolated. And so now that caregiver really has to spend a lot of time focusing on the needs of the elderly, because that's one thing that, you know, we have to understand is that we got elderly that are shut up in their homes now because they, you know, they can't go outside, you know, and so they really need some attention more than they did when they were able to at least once or twice a week come to the church and, you know, get to be cared for by people. Those are the things that we're doing right now.
Yeah. Okay, Reverend, what are
Yeah,
you doing?
and much like Pastor Webb, we have a team of individuals who our stewardess board is what they're called, and it's the ladies who serve the table, who are engaged with the life of all of our elderly members and really all of our congregation. And they effectively maintain that cohesive sense of community, help us to maintain that so that we can provide care for individuals and be there for them during this stressful time. You opened up with the question though about domestic violence, and those are some things where churches, where African American churches in general, have to be more engaged. We have within our congregation a young lady who is a licensed counselor, and it is her ministry. And by partnering with her, and that's her ministry, to provide counseling and care. We also have partnerships with other agencies, so that if any matter is too weighty or too personal for us to manage within the confines, of the congregation, we refer them to professionals who can help. I believe our churches have been guilty at times of trying to pray things away when you really need professionals who can help guide you, help you navigate those waters so that you can arrive at success.
And I am so glad you said that, Reverend, that sometimes churches are guilty of, just thinking their prayer is going to work rather than being realistic and bringing as professionals to actually deal with some issues at hand. So thank you for that. I want to talk about testing. Sometimes we may have, certain communities that don't necessarily trust the government to go to government centers to get tested. Do you have testings in your churches? I can start with you, Reverend.
We don't have testing within our churches, but part of our church, Hill Chapel, is a small congregation, a small footprint, but we effectively, as I'll use this over and over, partner with others, much in the same way that Bear Creek partners with other churches, smaller churches. We partner with agencies and other churches that have a greater capacity to do testing. We promote testing. We teach testing. We encourage individuals who are particularly showing signs to be tested, and we stand with them. Because people do, as I mentioned earlier, going back to the Tuskegee experiment and other things that have happened with the African American community, and even what we're hearing now, where some school systems, I believe in Washington State, are suggesting to send children of color back to school first. And for some to suggest that almost as a guinea pig. So that type of rhetoric, and ideology doesn't help. It hurts, our community's sense of trust for the agencies that are providing testing. So we try to be the voice of wisdom, the voice of reason, and the strength to stand with our members to help them understand that this is not a hoax. This is a real pandemic. We have not seen this before. And we want to do everything that we can to follow the wise guidance that we're getting.
Pastor Denis?
Yeah, no, we don't do any testing in our church, and we just not set up for it. We don't have the connections to get all of the testing material that's required. There is testing sites here in Irving. They're run by private companies, but like the Reverend said, I have since day one combated this mindset that a lot of people have had that this was a hoax. I've told people, no, this is not a hoax. And unfortunately, we had too many people, especially in the African American community, who didn't embrace wearing masks, who didn't embrace social distancing early in this effort. And I think, we're paying the consequences for it. But, I have told people, matter of fact, we have a church in Haiti, in Pyongyang, Haiti, that we actually adopted, that we do ministry with each year. And they have a pastor that was 87 years old, pillar of the community, started this church we adopted, and he actually passed away from COVID-19. And I mean, it really broke my heart, and I told my congregation, I said, look, I said, you may not know anybody who this is affected, passed away from it, but here's one example. And then his son passed away from it. I said, these are real life situations. These are real people that I know that I'll never see again when I make my mission trip to Haiti. So I've told people, look, yeah, we got to definitely take this serious. I do have members that are being tested, but it's usually like through their jobs. Their jobs require them to go get testing. I was talking to one of my members yesterday, had a member of their company test positive. Now they're having all of them test positive. I mean, go test. So we're getting a lot of testing done. We ourselves as a church are not providing any testing.
Okay. All right. So this being an election year, a lot of young Black people, don't come out to vote. Actually, most of election years, it's always, we're encouraging Black voters to come out and vote. We're encouraging Black voters to come out and vote. What is the church doing to ensure or to encourage Black voters to come out and vote? Reverend Clarence?
Well, we are very active and have always been active in the political process and empowering people. The only way to arrive at justice, you have to have a voice at the table. You have to be empowered, and our vote is our voice. That is the first voice that we have, as our cry in the wilderness is our vote. So we are actively engaged in registering, and we're actively engaged in getting individuals, motivating, encouraging, inspiring them to go to the polls. One thing I tell our young people, it matters. Many folk believe that their vote, is just one vote. It doesn't matter. It matters. It matters. It does affect change, and it's important that they get there. I think over the last 4 years, with the policies, many of the policy changes that have come about, we can see, we need health care in our community. We need quality health care. We need our schools supported. We need those things done that empower us and give us an opportunity to live lives of dignity and hope. And if we don't vote, if we just, rely on others to steer the ship, then, we end up, in a harbor that's not safe.
Pastor Denis, you're a pastor and also a city councilmen, which means
Right.
your voice is heard by even a larger community. So what are you doing to encourage this larger community that you have access to come out and vote?
Yeah, and this is a very touchy subject with me because one of my frustrations I've had about the African American community over the years is that they will not get out and vote. It's interesting to hear in Irving, and I represent a single member district called District 3, which in Irving is everything west of Beltline, but that's the district that has the highest African American population, and yet lowest voter turnout. Number one of the things that we do here at Bear Creek is we are actually a Dallas County voting center. You can actually come vote at our church. We just got through, we allow the county to use part of our church building. And so people that live in Dallas County can actually come to this church and vote. We've been doing it for several years. So I tell my congregation, when we get through the worship service, go right out the door and go vote. You have no excuse. You don't have to drive anywhere. You just walk around the corner and you vote. And so they do vote. So that's one thing we do. Another thing that I do is I try to encourage people and let them know that it is the local officials, it is the city council members and your state government that affects you more than anybody. And the people that you put in office in your city council and in your state is going to have more of an impact on you than who sits in the White House. And people don't understand that. And I'll give you a perfect example. Right now, we're having the struggle about the executive orders that are coming out, from Dallas County, these county judges, and then these mayors and these city council members making these decisions. Well, we're making decisions that affect you. As a council member, I can be part of 5 people that make a decision that says everybody in Irving is going to wear a mask.
Yeah.
As a city council member, I can decide to raise your property tax rate, which then determines how much property taxes you pay. So I try to tell people, you got to understand that, yes, it's important who we put in the White House, but what's going to affect your life more than anything is who you put in that mayor's seat, who you put in that city council seat, who you put at that state house down in Austin. And so if you really want to affect some changes, you got to put people in these seats. I'll give you an example. I was on a show similar to this, and we was talking about, police brutality and getting rid of, bad police officers. And the lady, she said, well, these police chiefs, they need to identify these bad police officers and get rid of them. Well, I had to enlighten her on something. I said, well, let me explain something to you about, especially in the state of Texas. And if you are what's called a state civil service city, the police chief cannot fire a police officer. And the same holds true for a fire chief. A fire chief cannot fire a firefighter. All they can do is recommend to a civil service commission, a board, that they be fired. But also the state has allowed that person who's been recommended to be fired, they can bypass that civil service commission and go to what's called a third party arbitrator.
Wow.
And so they can have an arbitrator then decide, I disagree with the police chief and I'm putting you back to work. Now that's law. And so somebody's go, well, they didn't like that. I said, well, you gotta get the law changed. And the law get changed down in Austin. Right. So that's what I'm telling people, that, the way you're gonna really help people understand that the importance of you voting is these city council people are the ones that's affecting your life every day. We're the ones that says we're going to enact a curfew and you got to be in your house at 10 o'clock. If 5 of us agree to do that, we can do it. So I try to encourage people that, yes, your vote do count. And what's interesting, in my first election back in 2011, it was a 3-party race. And I ended up in a runoff. I got 49% of the vote, but I ended up in a runoff. The guy that I ended up in the runoff with, he beat the third guy by 1 vote. One vote. Even after the recount, 1 vote. So he ended up in the recount. He ended up in the runoff because of 1 vote. So I tell people, your vote does count, and that's the misconception that we have. But also, in some cases, it's just laziness. They use it as an excuse because, because I'll have, people tell me, well, Pastor, who should I vote for? Well, you do the research. You go to these campaign forums and you talk to them and you go on their websites and you find out what they stand for. Then you decide who to vote for. You know, so I'll do that, and then and then I just try to set an example. You know, I try to set an example for my congregation. When I first ran for city council, I had one of my church members said, "How are you going to be a pastor and a city council member?" No, she said, "How are you going to be a councilman? How are you going to be a pastor and a politician?" That was the word.
Right.
I said, I'm a pastor at all times. I'm a pastor when I'm sitting in that city council seat. You can look at my voting record, and I vote based on my heart, and I based on, you know, God's word, you know, when I can. I said, so I'm not going to change just because I become a city council member or quote politician. I said, but you know what? We need more people like me or other leaders, pastors sitting in those seats, making those decisions. Same way on the school board, you know. So that's why we show people why it's important that they vote and that they themselves become those politicians. Because all politicians are not crooks, you know, but they're making decisions that's affecting you every single day of your life.
You go ahead, Reverend.
I'm sorry. I'm glad you said that, Pastor Webb, because you know, I hear all the time people saying, well, all politicians and they lump up. I'm like, well, if all politicians are that way, then vote for somebody who got conscience.
Right.
Vote for someone who has some compassion, some care, and some ethics. You know, and research. Look at those individuals. What have they done?
Right.
And you might be able to share more light on this, Pastor Ware, but most of those local elections and things, the difference between winner and loser is less than 1,000 votes.
Oh, yes. A matter of fact, in single member districts that you have, those elections, matter of fact, I'm the third African-American city council member in the city of Irving.
Wow.
But here's an interesting historical fact. The longest tenured council member of every council member that has ever ran for city council in the city of Irving is an African-American female. Her name is Jackie Townsend. She ran, and she was elected, believe it or not, in the 70s. And she was elected for 18 consecutive years.
Wow.
Now, this is Irving, Texas in the 70s and the 80s, an African-American female, she got elected. So anyway, so she was the first. She's actually the reason I ran for office too. She encouraged me to run. But I'm the third African-American. The second African-American name was Mike Galloway. He won by 30 votes. He beat his opponent by 30 votes. So Rev, you're right. Most of these places are determined by less than 100 votes. One of the African-American school board members who got voted out years ago, she lost by 60-something votes. And there was a guarantee there was over 200 or 300 African-Americans that didn't vote in her election. Could have put her in office.
So every vote counts. I'm going to read you a question that I actually got from someone. And he says, do you think that African-American pastors could help promote African heritage with the help from migrant communities for the sake of bilateral understanding of origins and speaking with unison? Reverend?
Oh, yes. Yes, very much so. In fact, one of the members of our congregation is Frederick Gazambe. He's the president of the Zambian Association within Dallas. He's a citizen of Zambia. He moved here, migrated here several years back. He and his wife, he's married to a young lady named Jessica, who's from Alabama, Huntsville, Alabama. And when we can get back together, Fred just recently, earlier in the year, was elected president of the Zambian Association, and we're developing a good partnership with Fred and with that association that we can bring in culture that is native to the continent of Africa, the nation of Zambia, And we very much welcome and look forward to partnering with the other nations, with citizens of the other nations here in the Metroplex.
Pastor Webb?
Here's a few things that we've done. Matter of fact, right before the pandemic hit, we were actually working on a production through one of the ladies in our community. Her name is Nefertiti Myers. She's from West Africa, but she was putting together a production called Mother Africa, A Truth Odyssey. And it was a big production that we was doing. Of course, we had to, it was planned for like late March. And so then when we had to shut down, we couldn't do it. But it was to really give a deep history of the African continent and everything. I was actually playing a part in it. But also every year for probably the last 15 years, we sponsored a Black History Gala during the month of February here at our church. And what it is, it's a dinner and a gala for youth. And so what we do is we ask the youth to dress up, they ask the girls to put on nice dresses, the guys put on suits and everything, and we give them a free dinner. We actually have the adults waiting on. We're put on, like waiters, but then there's a program that focuses on African history that the adults do. So we've promoted that, and then also we've hosted 3 children's choirs from Africa.
Okay.
One of them was the Ashanti Children's Choir. Then we've hosted 2 Ugandan children's choirs.
Okay.
And they all came during our services and ministered and performed and everything. So we try to promote that heritage, the proud heritage that we have, and so, like I said, I've been to Africa a couple of times. I've been to Nigeria. And like I said, I've been to Kiambu, which is right outside of Nairobi. As a matter of fact, I was in Kenya. Remember when the airport caught fire? Yeah, we had flew in.
That time?
We had flew in that Tuesday. I think the airport caught fire that next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, and I was amazed though, and I'll say this, then I'll get back. I was amazed at how Kenyan Airlines, how quickly they adapted. And did such a great job. But anyway, we try, and we have some Hispanic connections here. We have a Hispanic church that meets here at our church, use our facility, and we connect with them also.
Okay. All right. Lastly, does any one of you think that we are going to be able to turn Texas blue? And while you answer that question, please give our viewers information how they can get in touch with you.
Okay. I guess I can go first. That's interesting. Now Dallas County is starting to really step up. In that area. Texas, I don't know. If I tell you what, if I had a crystal ball, or if I was a prophet and I could see that far, I would say yes or no. But it can if we can get young people to go vote. Now I will tell you this: I'm not a straight party type thinker. Because I've voted for Democratic candidates, I've voted for Republican candidates. I'm registered as a Democrat, but I'm the type of person, I vote for the candidate itself. I got problems with both parties, quite frankly. I just want us to get some representation that's going to really be sensitive to the needs of the African American community. Again, one of the reasons that it's good that I'm on the council is I grew up in a neighborhood called Bear Creek. It's one of the oldest African-American settlements in the state of Texas. I grew up in a community that we had septic tanks back in the late 60s, believe it or not, because we was in the county. But I serve on a city council that the makeup is all white males, and they're good guys, don't get me wrong, that's not my point, but they all make good money. They're lawyers and they're retired. So they have a hard time understanding the plight of someone who has a house or barely making it, and their house is in kind of substandard conditions. So it's easy for them to just say, well, you know what, you need to fix it or tear it down, whatever. Because, if they want to fix it, they got the money to do it. But I have to tell them, look, everybody's not like you. I live with these people. I know these are grandmothers, these are mothers, these are people who can barely pay their taxes. I'm not sure. But if they want to reach me, we have a church. Our church has a website, bearcreekurban.org. bearcreekurban.org. If they want to call me on my phone, I'll give them my cell phone number. My cell phone number is 972-849-9421. And I don't know how many email addresses, but they can go to the City of Irving's website, or my email address is actually on our church's website. And I'll be happy to talk with anybody about anything that I can help them with.
Will we turn the state of Texas blue? That's a tough question. Let me say this about the two parties first. I am a registered Democrat, and it's interesting because my congregation is probably about 60% Democrat and 40% Republican. My small congregation. So I tread turbulent waters sometimes. But let me give my understanding how I see the two parties. The leadership in the Democratic Party, and it partly leans on what Pastor Webb just said. You tend to find more individuals that at least understand the plight of the folk who live on Main Street, the plight of the folk who live in communities and who have to make it day by day. And that's important to me, because in order to represent me, if you don't understand me, then you really can't see me. If you don't understand my plight, you can't see me. And the policies that you're going to back are the policies that benefit me. That individual is just going to see that as burdensome to their mission, whatever that mission is. So it's important. I think we can change the complexion of the voting map if we effectively partner with different segments of our community, like with what you're doing. If the African American community, if Black folk in America partner effectively with our brothers and sisters who have moved here from the nations of Africa, if we partner with the Latino and Hispanic communities,
Right.
if we partner with people who we have experiences and desires and hopes, if we effectively work together as a community, then we can move the needle in whatever direction that we need to move it to best support our needs. And I think that's what we need to do. In terms of putting those candidates in place, Royce West just unfortunately lost a runoff to MJ Hager. And percentage-wise, it was pretty close. And he did it with probably 1/10 of the budget that she had. So we have good candidates, and I believe if we use our social capital to influence those to come together, understand that we have like concerns, and then move the needle in whatever direction, or support that candidate, whoever that candidate may be, whether it's a Latino candidate, a Black candidate, whatever, a white candidate, whatever the candidate may be, that best represents what we're striving for. As far as contacting me, the best way is you can go to our Facebook page. It's Life at the Hill. Just search for Life at the Hill, and you'll find us, or Hill Chapel CME. If you'd like to call me, feel free. You can direct message me through the Facebook page, or you can call me at 469-222-9351. And thank you so much, Monica, for this opportunity to share with you on
Yes, sir.
your program and in your community.
Yes, sir. So I actually had Kimberly Wanjigi, and she was saying she wanted to give a testimony, but I've been trying to send her a message so I could bring her on the camera so she can give a testimony, and I don't see that she's there anymore. But I want to say thank you to the both of you for coming on. Again, anybody that is joining us, I've been talking to Pastor Denis Webb and Reverend Clarence. Thank you so much, guys. Until next time, we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Thank you.